the joyful announcement and the hidden jealousy. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the village of Ndimyo. The scent of roasting maize and the sound of children laughing filled the air. Amina walked briskly through the narrow pathways between the mud-thatched huts, her heart pounding with excitement. Today was the day she had been waiting for. She would finally share the biggest news of her life with her best friend, Zainab. Amina and Zainab had grown up together, inseparable since childhood. They had spent countless afternoons weaving baskets by the river, whispering about their dreams, and promising to stand by each other's side forever. So when Ibrahim, the man of Amina's dreams, had asked for her hand in marriage, she had known exactly who she wanted as her chief bridesmaid. As Amina approached Zainab's house, she found her friend outside, pounding yam with rhythmic precision. Her dark, braided hair was tied back, and her deep brown eyes sparkled in the afternoon light. Seeing her, Amina could barely contain her excitement. "Zainab, I have something to tell you." Amina beamed, clutching Zainab's arm. Zainab wiped her hands on her wrapper and smiled. "What is it, my friend? You look like a bird ready to take flight." Amina took a deep breath, her face glowing with happiness. "Ibrahim has asked me to marry him. The wedding is in 3 weeks." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The peso in Zainab's hand slipped slightly, and her smile faltered, so briefly that Amina didn't notice. Then, Zainab let out a loud, dramatic clap of her hands. "My friend is getting married," she shouted, twirling in circles. "Everyone, come and hear the good news. Amina is getting married." She danced around the compound, her laughter ringing out like a melody. Amina giggled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She had expected joy from Zainab, but this was beyond what she had imagined. Yet beneath Zainab's performance, a storm brewed. Inside, her heart clenched with something dark and suffocating. Envy. Amina was getting married. Amina would wear the finest beads, be celebrated by the entire village, and soon become a wife. Meanwhile, Zainab, beautiful, proud Zainab, was still alone. The whispers of the elders echoed in her mind. When will Zainab marry? Has no man come for her yet? She had always prided herself on being the best, more beautiful, more admired. But now, Amina was the one being lifted up. It felt like a cruel joke. Still, Zainab kept up her act. She threw her arms around Amina, forcing her lips into a wide smile. "This is wonderful news, my sister. Tell me, how can I help?" Amina's face softened with gratitude. "I want you to be my chief bridesmaid. No one else can stand by my side but you." Zainab squeezed Amina's hands, nodding. "Of course, my friend. I will do everything to make your day perfect." But as Amina left that evening, still glowing with happiness, Zainab sat alone under the old baobab tree, her hands clenched into fists. Her friend's wedding would not happen. Not if she could stop it, the birth of a wicked plan. The night sky stretched above Nimue like a vast, unending shout, the stars twinkling as though they whispered secrets to one another. But Zainab wasn't looking at the stars. She sat in the shadows of her hut, her mind a storm of bitterness and rage. Amina's wedding preparations had begun in full force. The entire village buzzed with excitement, women gathered to sew her wedding attire, elders planned the grand feast, and Ibrahim, her soon-to-be husband, walked with a new air of pride. Amina had everything Zainab wanted. And that was unacceptable. Zainab's nails dug into her palm. She would not let this wedding happen. The next morning, she set her plan into motion. She started small, whispering half-truths into the ears of the village gossips. "Ibrahim, have you noticed how he always avoids answering questions about his past?" she murmured to an old woman who loved to talk. "They say he once courted another girl in a neighboring village, and abandoned her," she told a group of young women at the river. I heard he only wants Amina because of her father's wealth, she suggested to a man who traded in secrets. But to her frustration, the rumors did not take root. The villagers adored Ibrahim, his honesty, his kindness, his hard-working nature. When the rumors reached him, he laughed them off, his love for Amina unwavering. Zainab ceded. Lies would not work. She needed something stronger. Something darker. That night, after ensuring no one was watching, she wrapped herself in a black shawl and slipped into the dense forest. Twigs cracked beneath her hurried footsteps, and an eerie wind whispered through the towering trees. Deep within the woods, where even the bravest hunters dared not tread, lay the home of Nanaya, the village sorceress. Legends surrounded the old woman like a mist. Some claimed she could summon spirits, others that she had once turned an unfaithful husband into a goat. Zainab had never dared to come here before. But tonight, desperation drowned out fear. At the heart of the forest, a small, crumbling hut stood under a crooked tree. A faint glow flickered from inside. Zainab took a deep breath and stepped forward. As soon as she entered, the scent of burning herbs stung her nose. In the dim light, Nanaya sat cross-legged on a woven mat, her wrinkled face unreadable. Her eyes, clouded with age, still gleamed with knowing. "You seek something unnatural," the old woman rasped before Zainab could even speak. Zainab's throat went dry, but she nodded. "I need to stop a wedding." Nanaya chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Jealousy is a hungry beast, child. Once fed, it is never satisfied." Zainab clenched her fist. "I don't care. I need your help." The sorceress studied her for a long moment before nodding. "There is a way." She reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small, black vial. Inside, a thick, dark liquid swirled like a living shadow. "This is the essence of the Forsaken," Nanaya said. "If you anoint the bride's forehead with just a drop on her wedding day, she will transform before everyone's eyes. No longer a woman, but a beast." Zainab's breath caught. "A beast?" The old woman nodded. "A creature of horror, unrecognizable, cursed to roam the world unloved and alone." For a moment, even Zainab hesitated. This was not just ruining a wedding, this was destroying Amina's life. But then she imagined Amina standing at the altar, loved and cherished, while she remained alone and overlooked. Her heart hardened. "What must I do?" Nanaya's expression darkened. "Magic of this kind comes at a cost." Zainab swallowed. "What kind of cost?" The old woman's voice dropped to a whisper. "A sacrifice." Zainab's pulse pounded. "What kind of sacrifice?" Nanaya leaned forward, her voice barely audible. "A life." Zainab's stomach twisted. "A life." The sorceress nodded. "A blood sacrifice. Something precious to you." Zainab's mind raced. She had expected payment, gold, perhaps, or a favor. But this. She thought of her younger brother, Hossein, his innocent laughter echoing in her memory. Her old grandmother, frail but kind. Her mother, who still called her my little star. No. She couldn't. Then she thought of Amina, standing in her beautiful wedding attire, glowing with happiness, while Zainab remained forgotten. Her chest tightened. Slowly, she met the old woman's gaze. "I will do it." The sorceress grinned, revealing teeth stained dark with age. She placed the vial in Zainab's trembling hand. "The deed must be done before the wedding night," she warned. "Only then will the magic take hold." Zainab nodded, her grip tightening around the vial. She had made her choice. There was no turning back now. The wedding day turns to horror. The morning sun bathed the village in golden light, but Amina woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest. Something felt off. She sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her arms as a chill ran through her. "It's just nerves," she told herself. "It's my wedding day, after all." Her mother and aunties bustled around her, dressing her in a gown of brilliant white, adorned with golden embroidery. They decorated her wrist with jingling bangles and lined her eyes with kohl. The scent of fresh jasmine filled the air as they wove the fragrant flowers into her braided hair. "You look like a queen," her mother said, beaming. Amina smiled, but the unease remained. Outside, the village was alive with music and laughter. The wedding procession had begun. Musicians beat their drums, children danced in excitement, and elders clapped their hands, praising the union about to take place. At the far end of the ceremony ground stood Ibrahim, dressed in regal attire, his face glowing with happiness. His love for Amina shone brighter than the midday sun. But in the crowd, hidden among the guests, Zainab clenched the small vial in her trembling hand. The time had come. The wedding ceremony unfolded in full splendor. Guests watched in admiration as Amina's father led her down the aisle, every step filled with meaning, tradition, and love. Amina forced herself to push aside the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. She focused on Ibrahim, his steady gaze, his warm smile. Then, just as she neared him, Zainab subtly brushed past her, whispering words under her breath. The incantation had begun. The moment the spell took hold, Amina gasped. A sharp pain shot through her body. A murmur rippled through the crowd as she stumbled, clutching her stomach. Then, to everyone's horror, she began to change. Her skin darkened, rippling as if something slithered beneath it. Her arms twisted unnaturally, her fingers merging together. Screams erupted as her legs fused into a long, coiling mass. Amina fell to the ground, but she was no longer human. Her wedding dress shredded as smooth, scaled skin replaced soft flesh. Her face elongated, her pupils turned to slits, her mouth widened into a monstrous jaw. Before the eyes of her family, her friends, and the man she loved, Amina transformed into a massive python. Gasps and wails filled the air. Women shrieked, children ran in terror, and the men stumbled backward, eyes wide with disbelief. "Witchcraft," someone shouted. "A curse." Ibrahim stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. Amina, his beautiful, kind Amina, was gone. The great python's head lifted, its golden eyes filled with confusion and fear. Then, it turned toward Zainab. And in that moment, Zainab realized that Amina was still inside the beast. And she knew exactly who had done this to her. The dark truth unveiled. The chaos in the village square was unbearable. People screamed, children hid behind their parents, and some elders whispered prayers to ward off evil. The monstrous python that was once Amina coiled in confusion, its golden eyes scanning the horrified crowd. Then, a voice rose above the panic. "Silence." The village elder, Nana Miri, stepped forward. Though frail with age, she held a presence that demanded respect. Her wrinkled hands grasped a carved wooden staff, and her sharp eyes swept over the trembling crowd. "This is not the work of mere misfortune," she declared. "Such a transformation does not happen by chance. This is the result of a powerful curse." A hush fell over the villagers. Nana Miri turned toward the python, her gaze unwavering. "Amina, if you can hear me, show us a sign." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the python lowered its head and blinked. Gasps filled the air. "She is still in there," Nana Miri said. "Her soul has not been lost. But someone among us is responsible for this wickedness." The villagers began murmuring, exchanging suspicious glances. Who among them could be capable of such a thing? Nana Mary's piercing gaze moved over the crowd before landing on Zainab. The moment their eyes met, Zainab took a step back, her hands clenching into fists. She forced a nervous laugh. Why are you looking at me like that, Nana? She stammered. I would never. Nana Miri raised a hand, silencing her. You tremble as if fire licks at your heels, child. Do you have something to confess? Zainab's breathing became rapid. She shook her head, but the weight of countless eyes pressing upon her made it harder to stand still. She could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. Then, Ibrahim spoke, his voice low but firm. Zainab, you were Amina's best friend. She trusted you. His eyes darkened. Tell the truth. Zainab's lips quivered. The silence grew heavier. The villagers leaned in, waiting. Finally, her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the ground, sobbing. I did it, she wailed. It was me. A collective gasp spread through the crowd. I was jealous, Zainab continued between choked cries. I couldn't stand that Amina was getting married before me. I tried everything to stop it, but nothing worked. So I went to the sorceress. Nana Mary's expression darkened. You sought dark magic. Zainab nodded miserably. She gave me a spell to change Amina into a beast, but I had to make a sacrifice. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to do it at first, but She broke off, sobbing harder. The villagers recoiled in horror. Amina's mother covered her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. Ibrahim's hands balled into fists, his entire body shaking. How could you? Amina's father whispered. She was your sister in spirit. Zainab buried her face in her hands. I didn't think it would really happen, she wept. I didn't know it would be this. Nana Miri struck the ground with her staff, the sharp sound echoing across the square. This crime cannot go unpunished. The villagers murmured in agreement, their fear turning into anger. But before judgment could be passed, a deep hiss filled the air. The python that was Amina lifted its massive head, its golden eyes locking onto Zainab. There was no rage in them. Only sorrow, the path to redemption or punishment. A heavy silence settled over the village square. The revelation of Zainab's betrayal had left everyone in stunned disbelief. Even the python, Amina, seemed to stare at her former friend with a sorrowful gaze, her massive coil still and unmoving. Nana Miri struck her staff against the earth once more, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. There is a way to undo this curse, she declared, making the villagers lean in closer. But it will not be easy. The one who cast it must offer a sacrifice of true selflessness. Zainab's breath hitched. A sacrifice. Yes, Nana Miri said gravely. The spell you invoked was born from envy and darkness. Only an act of pure sacrifice, one that cost you dearly, can cleanse the evil you have wrought. Zainab trembled. What kind of sacrifice? Nana Mary's old eyes bore into her. The spirits demand something precious, something tied to your vanity and deceit. If you truly seek redemption, you must be willing to lose your beauty and your voice. A ripple of shock ran through the villagers. Zainab recoiled as if struck. My beauty, she whispered, touching her face in horror. She had always been praised for her flawless skin, her radiant smile, her voice that charmed anyone who listened. To lose both. She shuddered, glancing around. The disgust in the villagers' eyes, the sorrow on Amina's parents' faces, and the quiet fury in Ibrahim's stance all told her the truth, she had no place here anymore. If she refused, she would be outcast, forever known as the woman who betrayed her best friend for jealousy. But if she accepted, her lips trembled as she turned to the python, her once beloved friend who had never wronged her. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't want to live with this guilt, she whispered. I can't. She fell to her knees before Nana Miri. Tell me what I must do. The village elder nodded solemnly and began chanting in a language as old as time. She motioned for Zainab to stand, then drew a symbol in the dirt with her staff. Step forward and kneel within the circle. Zainab obeyed, her heart pounding. Nana Mary turned to Amina's parents. Bring a vessel of pure water. Amina's mother quickly fetched a clay pot filled with water from the sacred well. Nana Mary took it and held it high. This water will cleanse the curse. But for the magic to work, Zainab must accept her fate willingly. Zainab clenched her fist. She closed her eyes and whispered, I accept. Nana Mary poured the water over her head. The change was immediate. Zainab screamed as searing pain spread through her body. Her skin tingled and burned as if fire licked at it. Her voice cracked, and she clutched her throat, feeling something being ripped from her. The villagers watched in stunned silence as Zainab's once smooth skin roughened and dulled. Her lips lost their color, her radiant glow faded, and her beauty withered like a dying flower. When she tried to cry out, only silence escaped her throat. It was done. At the same moment, Amina's massive python form began to shimmer. The golden eyes dimmed, and the scales faded into soft skin. Slowly, her body shrank, limbs returning, her human shape reimagined. With a final burst of light, Amina collapsed onto the ground, human once more. Ibrahim rushed forward, catching her before she could hit the earth. He held her tightly, relief flooding his face. Amina. Her eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. The villagers erupted into cheers, rejoicing that their beloved Amina had been saved. But their joy did not extend to Zainab. The once beautiful woman now stood alone, her head bowed, unable to speak, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Her punishment had been sealed. A lesson for generations. The sun had long since dipped behind the trees, casting the village in hues of deep amber and shadow. The echoes of the day's events lingered like a ghost in the air. Amina's near-tragic transformation, Zainab's confession, and the ultimate price she had paid for her betrayal. The villagers gathered one last time in the center of the square as Nana Miri stood before Zainab, her staff planted firmly into the earth. You cannot stay here, the elder declared. Your actions have tainted this village. But your suffering must serve a purpose. Zainab, her once glowing beauty now faded into a husk of its former self, lowered her head. She tried to plead, but no words came. Her voice had been stripped away, leaving only silence in its place. Nana Miri turned to the villagers. Let this be a lesson to all. Jealousy is a slow poison, one that rots the soul and devours the heart from within. May no daughter of this village ever forget what happened here today. A hush fell over the crowd as two elders stepped forward. Without a word, they guided Zainab away, leading her towards the outskirts of the village where she would live in solitude. No one followed. No one spoke her name. She had been erased. Days later, the wedding finally took place. It was a quieter affair than originally planned, touched by the shadows of what had transpired. But Amina and Ibrahim, though forever changed, were stronger for it. As they exchanged vows beneath the watchful eyes of the village, there was an unspoken understanding in the air. This was more than a union of love, it was a testament to resilience, to the triumph of truth over deception. And so, life continued. Yet, the story of the wedding that almost never was lived on. Parents whispered it to their children. Elders repeated it by the fire. The village carried it through generations, warning young hearts of the dangers of envy and betrayal. And always, at the end of the tale, the wise words of Nana Miri rang true. A heart filled with envy is a heart that devours itself.